What's up, guys, and welcome to a new type of video that I wanted to do, and I've been thinking about doing this for a little bit, and I've been inspired by a guy named Stefano Borghi, who is basically a commentator for DAZN, and he's been doing a lot of these interesting little challenge, I guess you can kind of say, where he picks the top 11 for specific teams or for specific countries and stuff like that, and this is something that's always really interesting, I think, for fans around the world, and I wanted to do my own little thing, kind of similar, but also very, very different, because as opposed to just picking, my favorite 11 players or, the best 11 players, I'm going to pick my favorite 11 players who have never played for Manchester United. Of course, being a huge fan of the club, anytime anybody asks for my formation, it's going to be, for the most part, of United players. So that's just how things are, and I feel like this challenge can definitely, go to people who have different who support different clubs. It can pretty much be done for any, and it'll be very different for pretty much everybody that puts together a formation. So I very much look forward to seeing if some of you guys in the comments let me know some of your formations. I'm sure we can have plenty of discussions about those, and you can definitely talk shit to me about some of the ones I'm going to pick. So like I said, this is going to be a list of my favorite players to watch. Not necessarily the best players, because you're going to see a lot of names that you probably would have put in there that aren't going to be on there. So don't insult me. This is just my preferences. All right. Or you can insult me. Just, keep in mind that it's not the best. It's just my favorites. All right. So in goal, I was a little bit torn between Gianluigi Buffon and Iker Casillas for two very different reasons. Well, number one, Casillas has won literally everything that there is to win for both club and country. So you kind of have to put him in there, right? He is a Real Madrid captain for decades, basically. And he was, of course, a major part of the Spain team that not only won, 3 major trophies in a row. They won Euro, World Cup, and then the Euros again. He wasn't just a part of that, but he was also a big part of the transition that led into that. So, being a captain, being a leader, it has to be taken into consideration. Gianluigi Buffon, however, has been a very, very, very big part of Italian football since the 90s. And this guy has, he played for Parma, he's played for Juventus, and he has been, except for the last season or two, where of course he went to PSG and he went back to Juventus and he was a sub for Szczesny. We're still talking about a keeper who has really stood the test of time and has pretty much been very consistent over the years. Has had some ups and downs here and there, but for the most part, he has done very, very well. With Juventus, he has won countless Serie A titles. He won the World Cup in 2006, and he was actually the latest keeper to realistically be in contention for a Ballon d'Or. So you have to give him respect, but for me personally, I'm going to go with Iker Casillas just because he won the Euros in 2008, the World Cup in 2010, then the Euros again in 2012 as a captain, actually. So he was a very, very important part of that in the locker room, and I feel like that has to be rewarded. Now, I'm going to go with a 4-3-3 just because I was thinking about doing a 3-man defense because obviously, attacking football is what I prefer, and of course there's more attackers than defenders that I really like, but I just feel like I always prefer having fullbacks in any team, whether I'm watching it or whether I'm playing, as in say, FIFA, for example. I've always been a big fan of fullbacks, so I'm going to go with a 4-man defense. And of course, at left back, there aren't too many options now. I could have put in Maldini because, of course, he is arguably the best left back of all time. I would probably say the best left back of all time. But that doesn't make him my favorite. My favorite is Roberto Carlos because literally every time this guy was on the pitch, you knew something absurd was very likely to happen. Whether it was his just insane rocket free kicks, whether it was just him bombing up and down the wing, it didn't really matter. Like Roberto Carlos, he was Brazilian football when Brazilian football was Brazilian football. You know what I mean? So he was one of my favorite players to ever watch, and just watching him with the Galacticos and all that was just an insane time. And, of course, Roberto Carlos, he's an icon, so I'm going to go ahead and put him on the left. As a right back, I'm going to go with Mr. Consistency himself, which is Philipp Lahm, of course, Bayern Munich and German legend. A guy who, throughout his entire career, has always been an icon a symbol of what a player can do if he just achieves insane performances every single week. Like whether it was playing for Germany, whether it was playing as a right back or as a CDM when Guardiola decided for some reason to take what was probably the best right back in the world and make him a defensive midfielder for no reason. When that happened, he was still performing very, very well. So Philipp Lahm is just one of those guys where no matter what you do with him, he's going to perform. And I have nothing but respect for him. And he's one of those guys where I feel like every single club would love to have him. You know, he was a leader. Like I said, he was always consistent. And he was just one of those guys where he's extremely reliable. No matter what situation he's in, he's going to shine. And that's why I feel like he absolutely deserves a place in my list. And I honestly, like, there were a lot of rumors for a while there that he was going to go to United. I never really believed it because I always figured, you know, he was going to be a guy that's going to stay in Bayern Munich forever. At most, he would maybe go to a Galactico or Real Madrid team, or, you know, post-Galacticos actually, I would say, or, you know, go to maybe Barcelona or something like that, just to go to somewhere where he's going to have that shine and go to a very different environment. But I always figured he was going to be a Bayern Munich through and through and always stay in Germany. That's what he did, and he's definitely an icon of that era. When it comes to the center backs, once again, I could have put in Maldini because I feel like, you know, once he's just a legend. I mean, there's just no denying it. He is arguably the best defender of all time. But, you know, once again, I'm not going to put him in this list just because I didn't really watch him as much. And, of course, these are only players I've seen. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. These are only players that I've seen and watched a lot. Now, I saw a lot of Maldini, but I don't know. He was never my favorite. I don't know. It was maybe something about him. Maybe it wasn't as much flair. He was just so perfect, but he just wasn't my favorite. Now, I have two players here. One is actually an AC Milan legend, and the other one is what I consider to be arguably the most clutch player in football today, because this guy has pretty much done everything, and he is, of course, the one and only Sergio Ramos. And I have to put him in there because, I mean, just look at what he's won. He won, you know, the Euro twice. He won the World Cup, okay, as a starter each time. He won, four Champions Leagues with Real Madrid or whatever it is. Yeah, I think he won 4. One with Ancelotti. Won 3 with of course, Zidane. So we're talking about a guy who, as the supreme leader of a team, has won everything you could possibly win. And we're talking about a guy, whether, you know, you can criticize him or whatever you want. He got rid of Momo Salah in the final of the Champions League. You can criticize him as much as you want, but in the final against Atletico Madrid, he came up in the very dying seconds of the Champions League final as a center back, and he got the goal that sent it to extra time. We're talking about a guy that, when it counts, up front and in the back, he's going to perform, he's going to find a way, and he's just always been extremely clutch, and I have nothing but respect for this guy. Like I said, you can hate him because he does have a very aggressive style. He does, you know, he can be hated. That's the way it is. But he's kind of like, in my opinion, kind of like a Roy Keane. Now, Roy Keane had a very different approach to the way he was a player. Of course, you know, he was very in your face at all times with his teammates. Ramos, I don't see him being quite like that. But what I mean is, Ramos, he leads the team with his performances. And that's something you look at, whether it's Philipp Lahm, it's Roy Keane, it's Sergio Ramos. He's going to perform, and you know when it counts, he's going to shine. He's had his fair share of red cards, of course. That's always been a problem from him. But whether he played as a right back or as a center back, I have always just absolutely loved Sergio Ramos, and he deserves to be in this team. Next up, we have Nesta. Now, Nesta is one of those guys where he's just, I don't know, it's hard to describe a defender like him. Like, of course, growing up a United fan, I've had the pleasure of watching guys like Nemanja Vidic, Rio Ferdinand, Jaap Stam. I've seen insane center backs play for this club, but Nesta, he might just beat them all. Like, honestly, that's how fucking good Nesta is. Like, my friend Jopin, shout out to him. He actually sent me a video last night, or 2 days ago. I think it was last night, at the time of recording, that, of course, it was the legendary tackle of a 36-year-old Nesta on prime Leo Messi, where hit this insane last-ditch tackle, got the ball perfectly, and just absolutely destroyed Messi in that situation. And how many players can actually say that, especially somebody at 36 years of age? So, just absolute legend Nesta is. And, you know, the legendary battles between United and Milan into, like, 2007, And 2006, 2007. All those were just insane. Like that final, what was it, the semifinal, where I think it was semifinals, where it was we won 3-2 at Old Trafford, and then they came, we went to San Siro, and they just beat the shit out of us. Kaká, Nesta, just insane team, and really a lot of Milan players could absolutely be on this list, but Nesta is so far the only one that is in there, and he absolutely deserves it. Now, let's move into our midfield three, and I definitely could have put in a lot of players, and since we just talked about Milan, I'm going to go ahead and mention one, or actually two, that I was definitely strongly considering putting into this team, because like I said, this isn't necessarily the best, this is just my favorites, and when I talk about my favorites, Gattuso has to be in there. I mean, Gattuso is just one of those players who, he was never technically gifted like some of the other players, especially in Italian football in that era, but the amount of effort, the drive, the hunger, the determination, how aggressive he is, there's only one Gattuso, all right? He's the closest thing to an Italian Roy Keane that I think has ever been, and there probably ever will be. I think the difference is that Roy Keane was just better. Now, Gattuso, though, I fucking love him, and I definitely wanted to put him in here, but I just couldn't bring myself to put him above some of the other guys that are on here. The other one that's a Milan player is also Andrea Pirlo, and he is a guy who I've talked shit about a lot over the years, and that's just because he is such an icon over here in Italy that, of course, everybody takes super offense to me talking shit about that guy. But there's no way in hell you can come up with a list and not put Andrea Pirlo at least as a on the short list. And what he did with Milan, what he also did with Juventus at an older age, it can't be denied. And of course, winning the World Cup in 2006. He's a phenomenal player, but he just didn't quite make my list. And who did actually make my list is a Juventus/Real Madrid legend. It is Zinedine Zidane, and you have to put the guy on there. I mean, one of the best footballers to ever to play the game, arguably the best midfielder of his era, won the Ballon d'Or. He came very close to winning the World Cup in 2006. He won multiple major trophies with France, including the World Cup in 1998. Just an absolute, just a powerhouse. Actually, I mean, Zidane, he literally won it all. And there's a reason why, when people think about legendary players, they don't just think about who was necessarily technically the best, but he was also one of those guys who just knew how to lead the team and lead by example. And that's something you're going to see very often in here is, he's just that kind of guy. He's a supreme leader, and he is a person that, he's a guy who will transcend the sport, because you kind of have to think about him when you kind of discuss like the great characters of sports. And of course, he's had his down moments, like headbutting Materazzi in the final, and eventually costing France the World Cup. Because I firmly believe that if he'd have taken the penalty in that penalty shootout, then France would have won the World Cup. But things happen, people make mistakes, and Zidane definitely made a mistake right there. But the fact is, Zidane is one of the best players of all time, and he's actually turning into a really, really solid manager. Of course, turning Real Madrid around this season, and then of course after a pretty rough time when he took over the team, he took over at a very rough time for Real Madrid, and all of a sudden they were winning 3 Champions Leagues in a row, and he made a good move of leaving when he did, and then going back, basically showing that without him and Cristiano, that team isn't quite what we thought it was. Now, let's move on to a midfielder who actually took the place of Andrea Pirlo on this list, and you might not agree with me here, because I feel like classic players tend to be seen a little bit better than they actually were, and that's not saying that Pirlo's not an amazing player. What I'm saying is, hindsight and nostalgia makes things a little bit more blurry than I like to look at when it comes to this type of stuff. So I'm actually going to put in a guy who plays right now, and he is one of Sergio Ramos' teammates for Real Madrid, and I think he is one of the most important people to actually have graced the game of football in the last decade, and that is Toni Kroos. And the reason I have to put in Toni Kroos is because not only has he done insane things and has won everything with Real Madrid, has won the World Cup with Germany, but he also did the same thing with Bayern Munich. Let's not forget that. He was a fundamental part of the Bayern Munich team that won the treble. He was one of my favorite players to use in FIFA when he was with Bayern Munich. and I have been a fan of this guy ever since he really burst on the scene. So, what I feel like puts him above Pirlo is just because I feel like Pirlo played in a generation where there were a lot of people around him where, I'm not going to say they were on his level or they were better, but I feel like he had a lot of people to where he could play a certain way and he could really figure out different ways to play. Whereas Toni Kroos has been essentially at his very best for a long time, and like I said, has been a very, very central part of a team that has won everything time and time again. Now, like I said, Pirlo's an amazing player, but I just feel like Toni Kroos, he guarantees you basically excellent performances offensively and defensively because he's not just a great passer. He doesn't just get great assists, but he's also scored some amazing goals. He's also, been, like I said, just a huge part of German football, of Spanish football, and I feel like what he's achieved has to be up there. And like I said, either way, you can maybe think that Pirlo's better. That's fine. I just feel like Toni Kroos definitely deserves to be on there. Now, we have a guy who unfortunately never really won much of anything, and that's down to loyalty. And no, I'm not talking about that little bitch-ass Steven Gerrard. That's just not going to be the case, is it? No way in hell I'm going to put a Liverpool player on this list. So, yeah, forget about that. This is a guy who remained loyal to Roma, unfortunately, and never went to Real Madrid or all the other major clubs that offered him something. Now, I say unfortunately because I would have loved to see Francesco Totti as a Galactico. I would have loved to see what he can actually do surrounded by genuinely great players, because at Roma, he never really had that. He had Cassano, who for a while was looking like he could definitely be a huge player, and then we unfortunately saw that he was just mentally deranged, and to this day he continues to make horrible decisions that have really cost him a lot of opportunities, both as a footballer, as an analyst, and as a commentator. So it's just been a bit unfortunate to see Cassano be like that, and that's a part of who he is, and that's a part of the genius that is Cassano. But unfortunately, that's a reality. So Totti I said a mix between Totti and Totti, so that was weird. But anyway, Totti hasn't really had the opportunity in his career to really play around like the elite of the elites, essentially. He played with Batistuta, he played with guys like that, but never consistently playing with the best players in the world, like I think he definitely would have had the opportunity if he played for, say, Real Madrid. So never really got to see him in that context, but what we do know about him is that technically he was arguably the best player in the world for a little bit there. I mean, you talk about guys who have made a specific kind of goal their trait, their trademark, essentially, and nobody is better at lobbing than Totti. There's nobody in the world, whether it's lobbing from outside the box, whether it's just doing it in absurd angles. He has done it from pretty much everywhere, and this guy is literally just a technical masterpiece. Like, the likes have very rarely been seen in the world of football. So I have nothing but the utmost respect for him as a footballer. Of course, he's had some moments where, spitting in somebody's face, and he's had moments like that in his career, which have really been a problem. But other than that, he's always just been kind of he's just kind of been an icon, and I was gonna compare him to David Beckham in the sense that in Italy there was a while there where he was just kind of an icon that transcended the sport, and I think really to this day the fact that he's the guy who does the most commercials kind of shows that. But Beckham was a whole different monster, and that's just obvious. Beckham is Beckham, Totti is Totti. The different people, different players, different lives, all that stuff. But I feel like Totti definitely was more than just a footballer from that point of view, and one hell of a fucking footballer, winning the World Cup in 2006, scoring decisive penalties against Australia, for example. He's always been a big player, a player for the big moment too. He's always been an underdog playing for Roma, and yet multiple times he was able to at least bring some silverware there and keep a pretty modest team battling for titles. So nothing but respect to Francesco Totti. And now we're going to get to, of course, the attackers, and I feel like I might get some criticism here, and probably more than some. I think I'm going to get a lot of criticism for the players I'm going to put in here, because Leo Messi is not going to be on this list. He's not going to be on there. He's not even close, because he's arguably the best footballer of all time, but I've never liked him. I understand that's like being the anti-football, and I get that, but I've never liked him for some reason. There's just something about him I don't like. And it's just the truth. Hate me if you want. It's just the truth. Now, I can't put in Cristiano Ronaldo for obvious reasons. And it might be because I'm a Ronaldo fan, so I've always had kind of, I'm actually a Cristiano nut hugger, so I've always kind of had this beef towards Messi, probably. That's probably the reason. But he's not going to be on there. I can't put in really, really great players. Of course, there will be no Thierry Henry, even though I have nothing but respect for him as a player. Amazing footballer. What he did with Arsenal was nothing short of just insane. There are just tremendous, tremendous footballers out there. But my number one striker is going to be R9, Ronaldo, the phenom, arguably the best player to ever grace the sport. From a purely attacking point of view, whenever this guy stepped on the pitch, you knew you were going to be in for a horrible, horrible night. Watching highlights of him going head-to-head with United is something that always just it just shows what an absolute destroyer the guy was. His pace was second to none. His physical strength was second to none. His positioning, his movement, everything on Ronaldo the Phenom was just perfect. He was the epitome of greatness. It really is a massive shame that he had so many problems with his knees and so many physical problems, and he was never really able to reach the amount of just the absurd amount of potential the guy had, because he was great when he was at the top, but unfortunately, like I said, with those injuries, he was never really able to play consistently and really just continue to score goal after goal after goal, and he scored a bunch despite all that. Even playing for AC Milan, even playing for Real Madrid as a chunky Ronaldo, you saw the amount of goals the guy still scored, and it was just something to behold every time that man stepped on the pitch. So nothing but respect and absolute adoration for what I honestly consider to be probably the best striker of all time. You can say Pelé, all that stuff, but he was more of a second striker anyway. And Ronaldo, I just feel like if he'd had the amount of time to shine that some of these guys had, he pretty much would have been unreachable. Whether it was with Inter, Real Madrid, whatever, he was second to none, and he has to be on this list. On the left, playing as a left wing / second striker, whatever you want to kind of put him, he's kind of a guy who can vary in his positioning. I have Alex Del Piero, and this is a guy who, as I mentioned earlier with Francesco Totti, this is a guy who basically trademarked a goal, and that was, of course, the curve shot. People don't understand the beauty of a Del Piero free kick if they've never seen it before. People don't understand the kind of goals this guy scored if they haven't seen him before. So I do really, really feel bad for the new generation of football fans who maybe don't quite know as much about him and some of the legends that I've listed on here, because I feel like a lot of it gets lost. And one of the things that makes Del Piero so great is that he wasn't doing it with the best equipment. He wasn't scoring goals like that with, the perfect balls that we have now. He wasn't doing it with the perfect boots that we have now. He was doing it with horrible footballs where they were extremely heavy. When you hit them, they could pretty much go anywhere. They were hard to control. They were hard to lift up. And he was doing that with that kind of equipment, with horrible boots. He was just doing it with very outdated technology compared to now. Footballers today are extremely spoiled from that. Even keepers, for example, having such insanely well created gloves now. It just, everything sticks to their gloves. Same things with American football players, receivers. Basically, they just have to put their hand out there, the ball's going to stick. So, it's the equipment has to be taken into consideration. So, guys, pretty much everybody on this list was performing insanely with way worse equipment and way less advanced scientific preparation and all that stuff. That's what makes this even more insane. And Del Piero, what he won with Juventus, winning the World Cup in 2006, even if he was not necessarily a primary player for that team, because he was a bit up there in age, but he did score important goals, like again in the semifinal against Germany. He scored, I think it was the second goal. So just, insane performances throughout his entire career. I'll never forget the entire Santiago Bernabeu standing up to applaud him as he went off all those years ago, because it was just the kind of performance that you just couldn't believe, and that was a pretty weak Juventus team too. So the things that man achieved throughout his entire career, playing in different positions, playing with very, very different levels of quality, it's just insane. So Del Piero has to be on this list. And the final player on here, playing as a right winger, which isn't necessarily his ideal position, his best position, it is football himself. It is Ronaldinho, and you can't make a team like this without putting in Ronaldinho. Now, you'll notice there aren't any Barcelona players except for him, and that's simply because I've never really been a big Barcelona guy. Like, I don't like tiki-taka. That's just not my cup of tea, but Ronaldinho, he is football, all right? Like, he wasn't necessarily better than Messi, who was the other guy I could have potentially put in there because, of course, just from a purely what he's achieved point of view, he probably wasn't as good as Messi, but really who is, you know what I mean? Like, but Ronaldinho, every time he stepped on the pitch, especially in the Clásicos, which you just can't take that out of context. That has to be put in there and has to be mentioned. In Clásicos, he was one of the few people in the history of Real Madrid versus Barcelona to have the entire Bernabeu stand up and applaud him. The amount of goals this guy scored and the quality goals this guy scored at the Santiago Bernabeu against their bitter rivals, and not to mention Champions League finals, not to mention in World Cups, all that stuff. This guy was insane, and the fact that he came literally he came that close to signing for United. I think it was in 2003 when he ended up going to Paris Saint-Germain, or was it? Yeah, I think it was PSG. Anyway, I think that's where he went and ended up going. It's just so disappointing because imagine Ronaldinho slotting in with the players we had back then. It was just, football could have been so much different. We definitely wouldn't have lost the titles that we lost to Arsenal and Chelsea. I just feel like we would have been even more dominant than we actually ended up being. And who knows, maybe we would have stayed for a long time. But I just feel like going to Barcelona, going to a place with that kind of weather, that kind of atmosphere, somebody who is really well known for partying, essentially, let's just be real, like somebody who achieved everything he achieved while also being a party animal, not really taking the best care of himself, making bad decisions, but still being the most sublime footballer arguably we've ever seen from a purely spectacular point of view. So Ronaldinho has to be in there. Of course, won the Champions League, of course won multiple trophies with Barcelona, and was just essentially the face of football for a very, very long time. So that's it, guys. This is my team. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like my team as well. Let me know in the comment section down below who you would take out, who you would add. Roast me. Give me compliments for my decisions. But most importantly, let me know who your 11 favorite players are who didn't play for your favorite club. Jopina, no Milan. Fabio Negro, no Juventus. Bakasi, no Juventus. GK, no Everton or Bournemouth, whatever you support. Whatever it is, you guys get my point. And of course, anybody who's listening, you don't have to be one of those guys. Just anybody listening, let me know. I look forward to discussing this. And let me know also if you like this kind of video. And I'll be looking forward to doing more of these if you guys actually do. So thanks so much for listening. Make sure if you did enjoy it, like I said, hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thanks for watching.